everyone, it's Amanda from Amanda W Creations. Welcome back to my channel. I am so excited to be back here on YouTube. It's been about 5 years since I created any card making videos. This will be my first official video back to YouTube, and I'm so looking forward to getting to know you guys in the comments. Please hit that button, the like button, and subscribe so that you are sure not to miss any of my future videos. So this video I made 4 birthday cards using some layering techniques. This stamp set that I used is from Sunny Studio, and the stamp set is called Bold Balloons, and it's a really unique stamp set because it creates realistic looking mylar balloons because you use different shades of ink and layer them on top of each other to create this dimensional look. Now, I actually only had 2 inks in my Lawn Fawn ink in the color family. So I'll show you what inks that I used here. I used Juice Box, Blue Jay, Bubblegum, Plastic Flamingo, Peachy Keen, Guava, Deep Sea, and Merman, Peacock, Celery Stick, and Freshly Cut Grass. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some cardstock and I cut them down to 5.5 by 3 inches. This cardstock is from Recollections. I get it at Michael's, and it's a heavyweight 110-pound cardstock, and it's a nice bright white color. I really like this cardstock. I was able to get 4 panels from one sheet of 8.5 by 11 cardstock when I cut them down to 5.5 by 3 inches. And these are going to work as my panels that'll go on my card base that I'll be stamping onto. I'm using my Misty here. It's a stamping positioner tool, and this helps me line up my stamps nicely without my cardstock moving too much. And those magnets help keep the cardstock in place when I'm doing all my layering of my stamping. So the first ink pad I'm taking is Peachy Keen. Now you're going to see here what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to ink up my stamp and I'm going to stamp it off on some scrap paper. And this is called stamping off or kiss technique. And what that does is it helps you get a lighter shade of your ink. Now, I actually end up changing this a little bit later in the video, and I'll talk about that later. But I'm doing this a few times to get a nice pale shade of that Peachy Keen ink color. I'm going to do the same with my green. This is Celery Stick by Lawn Fawn. I'm going to do the same thing where I ink up my first layer of my stamp set and stamp it off on some scrap paper and then put it on my panel. And I do it a few times just to try and get the shade that I was looking for. And it helps to be using the Misty because you're really able to get accurate stamping when you are layering those stamps on top of each other. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that initial panel that I created using the Peachy Keen ink, and I'm going to take the second stamp. This is the second layer. And I'm going to ink it up with that same Peachy Keen ink, but this time I'm going to go full strength with the ink pad direct to my paper. So this is how I'm getting that tone-on-tone monochromatic look using the same ink, because the first time I stamped off and got a lighter color. And I'm going to do the same thing with my green balloon here, and again using that Celery Stick ink, and you can see how you get that two-tone look. It's really neat. So I'm going to line up my second panel and do the same with my other green balloon. And I love using the Misty because it really helps me position. I just lined it up on the grid mat that comes with the Misty, and that's how I'm able to do multi-stamping and more than one panel and line up my stamping correctly. Now this is the third layer. Now it's got a little bit less detail. This is actually just like the edge of the balloon, and you want to use your darker color, and I used Freshly Cut Grass on that one. And for my Peachy Keen balloon here, I'm using Guava ink. This is when I noticed that that first initial layer was just a little bit too light. So I thought if I went back with my Peachy Keen ink and re-ink that first layer, I might still be able to get some dimension. And I'm so glad I did this because the ink on top of each other, I was still able to get some monochromatic dimensional look. And that first layer, I was able to see the color a lot better. Then I decided to make a mask, and I'm using this Post-it note paper. Now this is actually full adhesive, so there's just a tiny strip on the bottom of this Post-it note pad that doesn't have adhesive on it, and it actually works really great for masking because it is like a nice light adhesive where it's not going to damage your stamped image when using it to mask. So I'm going to add that over top of my heart balloon here. And that's going to help me mask off that stamp so I'm able to stamp on top of it without it getting on top of that balloon image. So now I'm using this star Mylar balloon stamp, layering stamp from that same stamp set. And this color I'm going to use is Merman. Now this is when I decided just to go on full strength with that first layer and add that to my stamped panel. And the nice thing about this dye ink is that when you stamp it, it does look a little bit blotchy at first, but the properties of the ink really help. They fade into the paper as time goes on, and you get a nice smooth look. It's a really good high quality ink, and I really enjoy using the Lawn Fun ink. So on this panel, I decided to use bubblegum for this one, and it's a little bit darker of a dark pink color. And on this panel, I think I'm going in with Merman again. And I'm just kind of mixing up the colors as I do different panels. Next, I go in with my second layer. And again, I'm going to go full strength with that same ink pad, that Merman. And because I'm layering the colors on top of each other, even though it's the same ink, you're still going to get that more intense, vibrant tone-on-tone look because you're continuously stamping that ink on top of itself. So I'm going to do that again. There's my Merman as well. And then I'm going to take another panel. And this is when I noticed that I messed up and I forgot to use my Post-it to mask off that first balloon. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to go with it. I'll just keep going on and keep stamping. And it'll look like the balloons are a little bit less opaque, like maybe they're transparent and you can see through the balloons. So 2 of the cards have the heart stamp that are masked, and then 2 of them aren't masked. But you know what? I thought I didn't want to redo all of that stamping, so I decided just to keep going. So I'm going to layer again this third layer of the stamp set, and I'm using my darkest pink shade, which is the pink flamingo, and that's going to help get a nice edge around that pink star balloon. Do the same for this one. They really do look like real Mylar balloons. It's such a fun and cool stamp set. So this time I decided to take the peacock ink to go around the edge of that stamp to really intensify the color. And now I'm flipping my panel over so I'm able to create a similar star-shaped balloon on the other side of the panel. And again, I have 2 of these panels have the mask, so that's going to help mask off the stamping. So 2 of my panels have like a purple and pink look, and then some of them have the blue and green as well. Now, I take this other Sunny Studio stamp. This is called Birthday Balloon, and it's another layering stamp, but I'm actually not using the balloons in this from the stamp set. I'm using the birthday sentiment as well as the happy. And again, I'll use my Misty to line up that stamp as best as I can so I can get a nice straight sentiment. And I'm taking my VersaFine Onyx Black ink to ink up my sentiment. It is my favorite ink to use when inking up sentiments. It's nice and crisp and very pigmented. The only thing is, because it is a pigment ink, you do have to wait a moment for it to dry. Not too long, but you just want to set your card panel aside to let that ink fully dry so you don't accidentally smear it. So I'm taking this tiny little happy sentiment from that same stamp set, and I'm lining that up with my Misty, and I'm going to stamp that on my panels, and so it says happy birthday. And I'll do that to all 4 panels. Now it's here I decided that I wanted to mask off my sentiment so I could stamp some balloon strings on top of the sentiment, and then the sentiment would look like it's kind of floating over top of the strings and not blended in with the strings. So I'm taking that string image from that first stamp set, and I'm going to use that to to add strings to all of my balloons on all of my panels. And using the Misty, it's really easy to switch from panel and continue stamping because using the Misty lines up the card panel so nicely, and I'm able to continue mass produce these cards without having to constantly readjust my stamp. So it's a really great tool if you are looking for a nice stamp positioner. I really highly recommend the My Sweet Petunia Misty. So as you probably noticed, I forgot, again, another mistake. I forgot to mask off one of the sentiments using some Post-it note paper. But you know what? That's okay. I'm going to continue on. And when you pull off the Post-it note paper, look at that. Isn't that so neat how those strings just kind of go behind the sentiment? You can see on this panel I got a little bit of ink, probably from my fingers when I touched the ink pad, but I just used my sand eraser and it just kind of scuffs off all that ink and it comes off really easily. So here I take that little bow stamp from that stamp set and I'm adding little bows where all of the strings kind of combine to make it look like they're tied together. And then I believe I'm also going to take this tiny little string. This is such a unique stamp set because it has all these little accessories that you can add to your balloons to make them look more realistic. And this is really cute. It has like a little curly Q, like a tie coming from the balloons. I didn't love the way that one looked, so I decided for the other 3 panels to switch it to this more straighter string. And I'm just adding them in all different kind of directions to make it look like there is a string tied to each of the balloons. So I used this little stamp for the other 3 panels. I decided that the strings needed a little bit more of a finishing touch to make it look like the strings were tied around the balloon. So I just took a black fine liner pen and I just added some little detail around the bottoms of the balloon to make it look like those strings that I had just stamped were actually tied around the balloons. This is when I realized that, I did forget to mask off that happy birthday sentiment on that one panel, and I didn't love the way that looked with the strings going through the sentiment. So I decided to stamp that same sentiment, the happy birthday stamp, onto some pink scrap cardstock that I happened to have lying around. So after I decided that I liked that look, having that pink panel go across that sentiment, I decided I was going to emboss on it with some white embossing powder. So I'm going to take my EK Success powder tool, and that is like a nice, almost like a baby powder texture that you put on your piece of cardstock or paper before you stamp, and that helps remove some of the static cling that you might get when you are stamping on a piece of cardstock. So I'm using my Versamark clear embossing ink. It's a really nice ink to use when you are doing embossing. And I'm going to use my reverse tweezers to hold that cardstock. It is really neat tweezers that holds, when closed, it actually stays closed instead of, when you squeeze the tweezers, it actually opens up instead of closing them. It's really neat. So then I poured my Wow white opaque embossing powder over top of that panel. And I'm heating up my heat gun. I've had this heat gun forever. It is amazing. It works so good. It melts so fast. It's an awesome heat gun. I'm going to pour the excess from a coffee filter back into my jar, my opaque white embossing powder by Wow. And there's my panel you can see that I stamped on. And I'm going to take first I take some foam tape. I thought I wanted to pop it up on the card. And I'm going to remove all the backing paper from that piece of foam. And after I put it on, I did not like it because I realized that you can see, when I turn the card, you can see the sentiment behind it. And I didn't want it to look like so obvious that I made a mistake. So I decided to rip it off, pull off that foam tape, and it did rip my paper a little bit, but that's okay. I'm going to cover it up. I'm using my favorite dot liner adhesive, and I'm going to glue that straight to my card panel. And I thought that looked much better. You can see my little thumbs up there. So there's my 4 panels. Not without any mistakes, but I think they're still turning out really nice. I was going to use this pink scrap to put behind the card, but I realized I didn't have enough pink cardstock to do all 4 panels. So I decided to cut some pink strips, and I'm going to use these to layer behind the panels. And these were cut to 1/2 inch by 3 inch. And I'm using my grid mat to line those up so I can get a nice straight line. It was a little bit too thick. I wanted a little less pink, so I just took it off and reapplied it. The nice thing about this this dot adhesive, when you use it, it's temporary at first before you really press it down, and then it does become permanent. So it's a really good adhesive when making cards. And I actually got that suggestion from Jennifer McGuire. She did it in one of her My Favorite Thing videos years ago, and I haven't looked back. I love it adhesive. I've used it ever since. So I'm adding 2 more pink layers of cardstock behind those 2 card panels. And for these other 2 cards, I actually decided to take this like teal turquoise color, and I'll use those. I also cut those down to 1/2 inch by 3 inch, and I'm going to add those behind these panels, and that's going to help bring out that merman ink that I used on those other 2 card panels. So I'll add these 2 strips to this card panel, just kind of using my eyes to line them up. Here we go. And again, see how I pushed hard on that adhesive? That's what helps it become a nice permanent adhesion to that cardstock. So there's my 4 panels. I think they turned out really nice. I was really happy with them. And I was thinking, you know, they need something. There's just something about them that I wasn't too sure they needed something else. But I was thinking about it while I would just started cutting up my card bases. So this is again 110 pound Recollections cardstock from Michaels. It's a nice high quality thick cardstock. And I took 2 sheets of 8.5 by 11, cut it in half at 5.5 and 8.5, and then scored it down the middle at 4 1/4. And that's how you get these nice A2 size cards. When I put my panel on, I thought, you know, it just needs something. I wanted a little hint of black to help that sentiment and the strings really pop. So I found this piece of black and white polka dot cards, pattern paper in my stash. It was just some scrap paper that I had. And I decided to cut them down and make little strips to add to the side. And when I did that, I fell in love. I thought that looked so neat with that little pop of black and white polka dots. I thought it was so cute, and it really helped that sentiment stand out a little bit more. So some of the cards I did a little bit differently. On this one, I believe I put a strip on either side of the panel. So I added that other piece to the side there. And I loved how that looked. I thought that looked really neat. So I decided to take my dot liner adhesive again, add that to the back of the panel, and then add that straight to my card base. So then I take another panel. Oh, before I do that, I do trim off the excess. The panel was a little bit longer than my card base, so I just took my large scissors, and that helps just trim off the excess so that they are the same size. And then this panel, I took this one strip of the black and white polka dot cardstock and lined that up. And this one, I kind of liked the way it looked with just the one strip. So I decided to line it up with the bottom of the edge of the card there. And I only added one polka dotted strip to that one. This way they are all a little bit unique from one another, and they're not all the exact same. So if you wanted to give this as like a gift set to someone, it'd be a really good idea because they have different color palettes and they're just a little bit unique from one another, and I think that would make a really good card gift set. So I added that panel to the card base, and again I'm just trimming down that card panel just to make it the same size as my card base. And this last one, I'm using this strip of the pattern paper, using my adhesive to adhere them together, trimming off the excess, and then adding that to my card. I think these turned out so nice, and I was really happy with how they look, and the colors, they go really well together. So there's my 4 panels. When I was looking at them, I think I stared at them for like a good 10 minutes, and I cut that out obviously, but I was trying to figure out, they just need a little more something. They just thought like they just need a little bit more pop of color. So I took my Nouveau Crystal Drops, and the colors I used were Crushed Grape, Bubblegum Blush, and Caribbean Ocean. And I just added a few of these drops to my card just to add a little bit more color and dimension. And I think they turned out so cute, and I really like how they turned out. This first card was probably my favorite. It was more minimalistic. It only had a few crystal drops on them. The other cards I went a little bit wild, and especially the pink. I think it's the pink card. Or the purple one, I can't remember, but I added way too many crystal drops, and I actually think it started to take away from the image and the sentiment, but that's okay. Sometimes when you're just crafting, you just gotta have a little fun. Now, normally when you use Nouveau Crystal Drops, you don't have to tap your card or swirl the nozzle of the tip of the nozzle, but in Alberta, Canada, it's quite cold in winter time, and they don't actually settle and go flat like they typically do in like the spring or summer months. Here you can see on that card I went a little bit haywire. So because it's so cold, especially in my basement, I do find that I do have to kind of swirl them a little bit to try and get them to settle and flatten out a little bit more. And then I do take my card base and just tap it on my countertop so that I am able to get them to flatten out a little bit better. Adding one more. After I looked at all 4, I thought, oh boy, I did go a little bit overboard with some of the crystal drops, but I still think that they turned out super cute. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and please hit that subscribe button and like the video so you are sure to not miss any of my future videos. Bye bye for now.